And the idea of this is really to create your own samples from either samples that you've got in Ableton or on your computer, or you could just record something into an audio file and then drag this straight into your sampler. Hello. Just to explain, what you're watching here is a clip from our Ableton Live 12 electronic music production video course. Check out the course curriculum and more lesson previews using the link below. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video. There's an audio track up here. I'm going to turn record enable on, and I'm going to press record. I'm just going to sing a note or hum a note like this. Let's hit record. Not exactly pitch perfect, but let's give it a go. Here is my recording. So we can go into Simpler here and drag that recording directly into our sample window. Let's adjust the loop a little bit. And now, if I bring the gain up, we should. We can make an instrument from our voice, which is very interesting indeed. You could also record a sound from a guitar, another instrument. The only thing that you need to check with something like this is to make sure that it is in tune. And to do this, I'm going to load in an audio effect in the utility called Tuner. Drag this onto the track. The tuner just analyzes the audio going through it and tells you what the pitch of that audio is. So if I press a C on my keyboard here, you can see, even though I'm pressing a C, it's telling me it's playing an A sharp. So all I need to do now, I'm going to go into the controls section. I'm going to go to these two controls here, transpose and detune. And if you look at the note, we're on A sharp, but we're also plus 30, roughly 35 cents above A sharp. We should be here, we're about here. So the first thing I'll do is go to detune and do the opposite of what this says. So if it's plus 35, we go minus 35. And now, you see our pitch is a lot closer to that A sharp note. Once we've got that in tune, we now need to just go from A sharp to C because I'm playing the note of C. You could also program in the note of C instead of playing it in a clip up here. So put in a note of C3, press play. And you can see I need to change the tuning. I've just nudged it up 2 semitones using my arrow keys until it also reads C as well. Now we've tuned it, we can play chords, and those chords are going to fit with any other instrument that we load in because it's now properly in tune. If we hadn't have tuned our instrument like this, when we play a C, we would have played an A sharp. So instead of our song being in C major, for example, it would actually be an A sharp major, but you just wouldn't know it. Ableton wouldn't be able to tell you that because you'd be writing everything in C major. And the final thing to talk about in the classic mode is the way we control the volume of our instrument. And in one-shot mode, we had our fade in and fade out parameters. But in classic mode, this changes to something called an envelope. The controls are in the bottom right over here, but the actual shape is over here above it. And we need to click on the amplitude button here, and it will show us the amplitude envelope or the volume envelope for our sound. And you'll see when you start to change these dials, it will change that shape above. If we're looking at this shape here, this is the shape that's going to be applied to the volume of our sound, with the bottom of the shape, this kind of flat line underneath everything, being silence, and the top, this top point up here, is the maximum volume it can be. And this envelope triggers when we press a key on our keyboard or when we program a note. It's basically a volume shape, and we move along the shape from left to right. So this is where we are right now. We're at the beginning, complete silence. And when we press a key down, we trigger the first stage of the envelope, which goes from here up to our first point. And this stage is called the attack stage. And the attack just controls how long it takes to go from complete silence to that loudest volume. So you can see it's measured in milliseconds, so 19 milliseconds is how long it takes to go from silence to maximum volume. So if you have this very short, like 0, as soon as you press the key, it will start to play the sample. If we bring this up, it kind of works a little bit like the fade in from before, where it's now going to take around about 3 seconds until it goes from silence to that maximum volume. So we get a much softer fade in. Now we move on to the decay and the sustain. They're very closely linked, these two. And it's actually better to talk about the sustain first. So the sustain is actually a volume. It's a level in decibels. Sometimes it can be classed as a percentage as well. And all the sustain does, as long as you've got that note held down, once you've reached the end of the attack stage, what will the volume sustain at? So if it's at full, like this, and we hold down a note, the volume will stay at the maximum as long as you've got the note held down. I can just keep holding this down forever and it's going to play forever. It's going to be at maximum volume forever. If, however, we bring this down to 0, which is silence, I'm still holding this key down, but you hear the volume has silenced itself. So I'm literally still holding it down as we're talking, but because the sustain is at silence, that's where the volume will sustain. If I bring the sustain up, you can actually hear it bringing the volume back in. The decay then ties into this, because if we are at a sustain like this, for example, the envelope has got to go from the maximum volume it can be down to our sustain level, and the decay just says how long that journey will take. If it's instant like this, we go up the attack phase, fade in, and you can hear that pop is when we finish the attack phase and it jumps to the sustain level. If we set it a little bit longer, you can hear it starting to take longer for it to reach that next sustain level. And the best way to really hear this is if we bring the attack time down to like 1 millisecond, which is very, very quick. We set the sustain to 0. We play around with the decay. We can start to make a sound similar-ish to like a piano. Bring the decay up. Have very long decay times. It'll sound like the volume isn't dropping. But if I keep holding on, you can hear it slowly fade in towards that sustain level at 0. And so those are the first 3 controls: attack, decay, sustain. Now the final stage is the release stage. And up until this point, through the attack, decay and sustain, we've been holding our note down. So this is all happening whilst the note is being held down. And the release stage only kicks in when we let go of our key. On the release here, if we set this to be very quick, when we let go of a note, it will stop straight away. I can show you this as well in here. If we make quite a short note, it stops just as the note pretty much finishes. But if I bring the release up, you can hear the actual sound is lasting past the end of our note. And if I bring this up to be really long, it will slowly fade away, but only after 10 seconds. And this can be really interesting because if you just play small notes on your keyboard, all of the notes start to overlap because they're still fading out very, very slowly. And you can can create these really, really nice drone-like effects. So that's kind of like the fade out, but again, it only happens after you let go of the note. And the only other thing to point out really is when the sustain, for example, is at full, like it is right here, the decay doesn't actually do anything. But we can make a few different shapes. As we said before, for like a piano keyboardy type of sound, we want to have a fast attack, no sustain, and the decay can really be as long or short as you like, depending on how snappy you want the sound to be. The release can be anywhere really as well. If you want something that's a bit more suited to like a string sound, something quite soft and evolving, then we want a long attack. We can have a full sustain, or we could have a sustain a little bit lower. I'm going to go full sustain, and we'll also have a long release too. Now we've got a nice, smooth, evolving pad sound. This is just a very quick look into the classic mode. There's a lot of other stuff to look at. Most of the controls are the same though from drum racks, so your filter will react in the same way. All the drive settings work as well and everything too.